Today, I'd like to welcome Tabitha Holman. She's a teacher, mother of two, a staunch advocate for metastatic breast cancer awareness, and the embodiment of strength and poise. Tabitha, thank you for joining today to share your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, taking this back to the beginning, you were on maternity leave,
Correct.
and you found a lump while breastfeeding. What happened next?
Yeah, so it was actually the first time I was away from my baby. We had to travel for my husband had a work thing, and I couldn't bring my son was about 5.5 months old at the time. And it was then when I first found the lump. So of course, naturally, you're thinking, okay, it's probably a blocked milk duct I was pumping. And when I got home, he was due for a 6-month shots. So I bring him to the doctor and I bring it up. And of course, same thing is reiterated, you're breastfeeding, this is normal, don't worry about it, keep an eye on it. And it happened to be that I also was navigating some cardiac issues because I was born with a heart condition, and things kind of came to light while I was pregnant. And so I was being monitored a lot, and I brought it up to my cardiologist and the technicians who were running the scans on me. And every time, because it was in my left breast over my heart, they said, oh, lumps are normal. And yeah, then sure enough, finally, when I stopped breastfeeding and noticed I had swollen lymph nodes, went to my doctor, was able to get an ultrasound. That didn't really show anything. It just that they said it looked like there was an infection. And I pushed and pushed and pushed because at the time I was too young to get a mammogram in Ontario, and I was low risk, so I didn't qualify. And I finally got the mammogram. They turned on the machine and they're like, they gasped, right? And I knew in that moment that, it must be cancer. They called in the doctor who had left for the day to do an emergency biopsy. And my world just kind of fell apart at that point.
So you've also been sharing your journey on your social channels, and what struck me was the incredible poise you've always maintained while explaining your difficult journey through and the frustrations you've experienced. Was that always you, or has this kind of been was it born out of the chaos?
I think it might partly be born out of the chaos, but also I think I've just always been somebody who tried to find, I don't want to say the positive of things, but part of my coping with things, I think, is just trying to handle it in the way that I do and to talk about it openly. Maybe that's the teacher in me. Sometimes when you are in a classroom full of kids and there's chaos going on in the world and they have a million questions, you have to kind of keep it together and, answer them and keep them all calm. So it's sort of, I think that's just part of my training and part of my personality. I apologize. I need to get this cat out of here. He's just, I'm sorry, he's in the background meowing. I'm like, of course, I thought I shut the door and he finds a way to get in here. I'm like, I'm sorry for the background noise.
So your treatment journey has not been an easy one. I understand you had to pay out of pocket for the chemo medication.
I was supposed to, yes. So how that happened was I have what's called HER2 positive hormone negative breast cancer, which is actually a really rare subtype of breast cancer. So it's not fed by hormones, so hormone blockers wouldn't work for me. I had to go through chemo even as stage 4, which doesn't always happen in breast cancer. And I also needed to get what they initially thought I was stage 2. And because of my heart condition, they were going to have to give me a different chemo from the standard of care. And that was fine. So I was going to have that plus one of the targeted treatments, Herceptin. But there was another one called Progetta that helps essentially the Herceptin work better by blocking another channel for the tumor growth or whatever. And because they were giving me, I don't want to say an easier chemo, but a different chemo than would have been standard protocol. They wanted to add on this other targeted therapy. But in Ontario, that's not covered if you're early stage. So suddenly I was then hit with trying to figure out how I was going to pay for it, which was going to be $4,000 every 3 weeks, because that's when I go for my infusions. And initially, of course, the province denied it because it was outside standard of care. And then my insurance denied it. And I tried to appeal it with my heart condition. It still got denied. I was sent to the Trillium Fund to try and get funding. They agreed to cover half. So it was still going to be $2,000 every 3 weeks. I was on mat leave making like less than $1,000 every month. Like, it was just, yeah, it was impossible. And then nobody told me for several weeks. Unfortunately, when I got upgraded to stage 4, because that's obviously the last place somebody wants to end up, but Perjeta was now covered. So it's only covered in the stage 4 setting, which is frustrating for anyone with early stage HER2 positive breast cancer, because it can really cut down on reoccurrence. And I actually just helped fill out a patient advocacy letter to try and advocate for Perjeta being available to people with earlier stage breast cancer as well. But yeah, it was crazy, because I was just they're like, yeah, you have cancer, and here, now you got to figure out how you're going to fund your cancer treatments. And I was running around to different offices making calls, and like, this is like, you get the worst news of your life and then you're given homework. Like,
Exactly.
it was awful. It was awful.
So was this all taking place at the Odette Cancer Center?
No, actually, so this was at Princess Margaret initially. That was where I started my care. I was recently at Odette because when the cancer lesions had spread to my brain, there's a radiation oncologist there, kind of specializes in the type that I have. And he's basically the guy who brought Gamma Knife to Canada. So my doctor is like, he's the best of the best. You're going to see him. So that's why I ended up at Sunnybrook. But otherwise, most of my care has been at Princess Margaret and also Mount Sinai, because they have a clinic dedicated to younger women diagnosed with breast cancer.
So it was that Gamma Knife treatment a one and done kind of situation?
For now. That's the frustrating thing about this type of cancer, is that the brain lesions are common. And so they kind of watch. So now every 2 months, they're going to give me an MRI to kind of check and see. And if they pop up again, more Gamma Knife. And if they don't pop up, no Gamma Knife. The hope is that I can continue to stay on the treatment that I'm on. It's just because it's cleared the cancer from the neck down, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. There are some drugs that are in trial right now that do. And unfortunately, I tried to get into a clinical trial and I just missed the cutoff, because they have a medication that they can give right now with my treatment that can prevent it from spreading to my brain. So now I'm sort of a sitting duck waiting for Canada to approve this treatment, which is already used in the US. But we always drag our feet behind them, unfortunately, and have to do our own trials and things. And so that's frustrating. So I guess the plan is playing whack-a-mole with the brain lesions whenever they pop up. And hopefully soon they'll be able to give me the drug that's supposed to prevent them in the first place. So,
Did you get to take home your mask?
I did. You got yours?
Got mine here.
I know, it's a weird souvenir. And as my first thing, my 5-year-old saw it and put it on his face and was like, ah.
Oh. Yeah, I'm sure there were mixed feelings about seeing that.
Yeah, it was kind of, obviously it's a bit traumatic. I will say that I used to be claustrophobic, had to get over that real quick with all the scans and MRIs and things. So yeah, it's definitely weird being bolted to the table like that, but at least hopefully zap the right spot. So we'll find out in the coming months, I guess.
Speaking of your children, you appeared on TV a few weeks ago
Yeah.
to speak about metastatic breast cancer and the toll it inflicts on the whole family, especially children. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So I was asked to do a book launch for a resource for parents with metastatic cancer. The book is about a family with metastatic breast cancer, but it's really for anybody navigating that and sort of the uncertainty in that. And it really does impact all families. I mean, it's kind of a weird perspective shift, because as a teacher, I used to support families who are going through things like cancer in the family and that, and now to be on the other side of it and be the patient and the mom with the children whose like mother has cancer. It's just like one of the first things I did when I got diagnosed was I was trying to find resources to support my kids. My son had just started kindergarten and, was doing his first Terry Fox run, and that's all he knew about cancer. And talking to a young kid, and my 2-year-old still has no idea because he's 2. He just knows that this has always been mommy going for her special medicine at the doctor, and I just kind of do it in whatever way they can understand. But yeah, it's really important that for parents to have supports, because this is very difficult on the entire family to navigate, and kids don't always understand. In the book that I was featuring on TV was about sort of following a family. It's summertime and the girl's kind of sad because they won't be able to do a lot of the activities because the mom's cancer has come back, and so she's in a lot of treatment, and so they're trying to do magical fun things together and still make memories and have a good summer in spite of that. So it's just important to have those resources that kids can recognize their feelings and see themselves in other stories, and that oh yes, this family's also going through that my family's going through. So it's important. Representation's important.
So, as a father to a young child myself, I'm curious, how did you approach, I guess, with the older one at least, how did you broach that topic?
Yeah, so I was, again, very random. 20 years ago, I did all these things, but I was trained as a child life specialist before I became a teacher. And I did a lesson with him. Basically, I sat him down. We drew a picture. I actually recorded it to show other families how I did it, just because, I just thought it might be helpful. But we drew a person. I showed him where the tumors were, like they're like the bad guys, but these are all the healthy cells in the body. And we need to have special medicine that's going to take these bad cells and turn them blue like the other ones. And so we did this whole little activity together. And it's still this little drawing that he did because he wanted to redraw it with only the healthy cells in my body. And that's been sitting on my fridge every day. I look and I manifest that. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be my scans like every time. But yeah, we talked about it that way. We made it a little activity so he understood, and he understands like I go for my special medicine every 3 weeks, or I go to see the doctors. I had to have the special mask to have a treatment. And so he's kind of got this general understanding of everything. He even has a little doctor kit, and he was like, I was showing him, he was like he's got a little teddy bear. He's got Band-Aids all over him because he keeps giving him his special medicine, So he's got little ways of trying to process it.
So, with all these nonstop treatments, I understand you have not been able to return to work.
Yes.
How has the school board responded? Have they had your back throughout this whole ordeal?
And it's weird. So apparently, as I've learned, you don't have a lot of job protection when you get diagnosed with cancer when on maternity leave, because I had to take that like sick leave during. I was under the impression through my union and through, chatting with my principal that I'd be able to return to my school if I could, return in September, and that had been my goal. Of course, there's some, unpredictability there, obviously, with having cancer, but I had been doing really, really well. And I found out end of June, like last day of school, basically the end of the day, that they had decided to just surplus me, bump me from my school. And apparently it was a general thing they did just because I technically was on long-term disability, but that was intended to end. And I had already communicated that with, my intentions with returning to HR, to my principal, to the union, everything. And everybody was very, very surprised that HR kind of made the move, but technically I had no job protection. And they claim it's because they needed to fill, they had a surplus of teachers and they needed to give somebody a job. And when I do come back, they'll place me somewhere. But being placed somewhere in a giant school board when you already live outside the region, like it's just not I was very upset. I was very hurt given the circumstances. Like I hope there's not a lot of us who've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer on maternity leave, but like for those of us, like this situation and understanding what was going on and what was happening to me, I really didn't need the added layer of stress. And now the uncertainty of like, what does that look like? Like I have to be surplused into a position and a new school where I don't know anybody. And I'm again, like I'm still on leave. I had wanted to go back, but yeah, so where it's just the uncertainty and the fact that, given the circumstances, it really even still wasn't any sort of compassion for me. It was really
Mhm.
frustrating. I've been working for them for 20 years. I started as an EA in 2004. I even got my 20-year card in the mail recently. And it's like, I've been a loyal employee all these years. And it just kind of felt like, it didn't matter, you know?
So amid all the uncertainty and chaos, I think you've found some solace in advocacy. You've been working with a Canadian charity called Rethink Breast Cancer,
Yes.
which I believe they focus on um, underserved groups, especially younger women who have been diagnosed with cancer, and particularly metastatic breast cancer. Can you share a little bit about the charity, how you found it, and what your involvement has been?
Yeah, so one of the first places when I was diagnosed and I was looking for resources for my family, I stumbled upon the Rethink website and learned a little bit about them. And I saw some of the advocacy work that they were doing. It was actually about a year ago yesterday, it was World Cancer Day, and they were hosting a letter writing brunch in their office where we show up and we were writing letters basically to talk about we needed to kind of revamp a lot of the system and getting access to newer drugs, like the whole story of me with Progetta, like things like that, like these weird systems and precision oncology. We know that's so important. Like, why are we so restricted with standards of care? Like, so we were writing letters to just be like, we need easier access to drugs. And I went there, and for the first time in all of this, because I didn't know anybody else I knew women who were diagnosed younger, but they were earlier stage. I didn't know anybody who had the type I had, who was stage 4, who had young kids. And then I'm in this room and I'm meeting all these women. And finally, I found like women who understood what I was going through. And through there, when they had an opportunity they were looking for key collaborators, and I wanted to get involved and interviewed in that. So I've been working with them. They do a lot of really great things. They really, particularly for younger women, for marginalized women, for women, like young mothers and different situations, they provide support. And they're also really big in supporting the metastatic breast cancer community. They have a fund for metastatic breast cancer research, which is so underfunded and so important. And so it's been really kind of healing to be able to kind of give back in a really awful situation I find myself in, to be able to kind of feel like I'm doing something about it.
So I'm sure you're advocating for changing the treatment standards. You mentioned earlier that your heart condition you were born with, was grounds for excluding you from basically OHIP would not cover. Um, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Eh, how can you, or how would somebody go about advocating to change that?
Well, for that particular drug, initially, I actually had just saw that Rethink Breast Cancer. Again, they're kind of leading this initiative that they're trying to push the Canadian government to make it accessible for everybody. And so I shared my story with them, help to with the advocacy work that they're doing in the paper that they're submitting. I forget the organization, CADIF or whatever, who kind of oversees the drug access in Canada. So my hope is that that changes for everybody, but also to share about, yeah, there are nuances. Like when I shared that, I had a few messages from people who were like, yeah, my mom went through that, or yeah, I went through that, or yeah, this happened to me, or this happened to so and so. Like it's a story that's not exclusive to me. And when you have a certain health thing going on with you, like my heart condition that denied me even being able to have chemo. I needed to wait to get clearance. Like it was so stressful those first few weeks. And if they had said no to chemo, I know I wouldn't still be here, because the type of cancer I have is so aggressive. You have to get chemo with it initially in order to knock it back. So yeah, it was just, there were so many moving pieces, and it was just shocking. Like, I'm somebody who's kind of navigated the healthcare world in different facets in my life, and I've never been treated so terribly. Like, I hate to say it, as a cancer patient, I'm in shock of how the system is so rigid and almost broken in a sense, where there's so much more they could be doing for cancer care. And when I talk to the doctors too, and I remember crying in one doctor's office. I said, I did all the right things. I showed up to everybody. I tried to get scans. They all told me I was low risk, too young. Here I am with stage 4. How does this happen? And they're like, yeah, we know it's a failure of a broken system. Like we have all these rigid things in place. I scored too low on whatever test to be able to qualify for early detection. And then even though I had cancer, so it's just, there's so many things that it's like, if they just, if they would have funded the mammogram for a younger woman, they wouldn't be paying all this money now to keep me alive. Like, it's just, there's so many things that we can do to improve healthcare in Canada, because we all pay a lot for it, and we all deserve equal healthcare access and, accessible access for everybody. It shouldn't be that just because, I have a spouse who's still able to work, and there's a single mom out there who finds herself in the same situation, and while she can't get funding for the drugs that she needs and her hands are tied, but somehow I can, because I have, somebody else who's able to help cover those costs, like, which wasn't true, by the way. We didn't have any money for that, but like, it shouldn't be that way in Canada. We're all supposed to have this equitable, accessible healthcare, and things are falling through the cracks, and the holes are getting wider, and people are falling through, and it shouldn't be this way.
So in terms of getting access to mammograms, I believe it's women over 40 qualify. Now, can you clarify the difference between screening mammograms and diagnostic mammograms?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. They literally announced the drop in age to 40 3 days after I found out I had metastatic breast cancer. So it was almost like, it was like, yay for everybody, but like, it was kicking me when I was already down, because here I was, I had just turned 40, but still I was told I was too young because the age was still 50. But yeah, so a lot of women don't realize, and I didn't even realize this until I started working with Rethink Breast Cancer, that those regular mammograms that women go for every 2 years, or 1 year, depending on special circumstances, but they are a screening mammogram, which is a general picture, just look at things quickly, and there you go, see you in a couple years. But a diagnostic mammogram actually looks at the particular area, takes several more images, it's more thorough. And so what happens is, a lot of women I've spoken to are like, well, I just had a clear mammogram, and then when I felt a lump, I didn't think anything of it, and then suddenly I have stage 4 cancer. And yeah, because well, first of all, there are types like what I have that are very aggressive and they pop up really fast. But the screening mammogram can miss them, because it's a general quick look. It's not a thorough, look at a certain area. So I tell women, like, anytime you feel anything like a change, I don't care if you just had a mammogram a month ago, go to your doctor, see if you can get more diagnostic imaging done specific to that area, because yeah, like, people don't know there's a difference.
Do you mind if I ask what your prognosis is?
Yeah, so it's hard because it seems to be evolving right now. There's been new drugs and new treatments and sort of things. So it used to be 3 to 5 years, and I'm, a year and a bit in. This is with medication, with chemo, with everything. But now they say that they're not, like, the doctors told me, oh, we think we might be able to give you up to 10 years now. I don't know. Again, there's nuances, because, it can really depend on how you respond, where the spread is. Like, I was bone only, and then it just spread to my brain, like, within a year of treatment. So I'm just like, okay, well, what does that mean? But Now that we have Gamma Knife, we don't really know. So they still say a blanket sort of 3 to 5 years. However, I feel like, and I have to stay hopeful because it's the only way I'm getting through this time, is to imagine that, the newer drugs that keep coming out and keep getting longer and longer, and hopefully we get to a point where perhaps I'll live long enough to be able to see a cure. But that's sort of where I'm sitting at now. And it's hard because a lot of us still have to ask those questions, and that's what the data says, but we know that the data is outdated. It's usually about 5 to 10 years behind based on how the studies go. And with things like, for example, Perjeta, adding Perjeta to that drug that I, wasn't able to access, to Herceptin, has really increased life expectancy for a lot of us with stage 4 HER2 positive. And I can imagine, once they actually have those numbers for long enough, they'll be able to see, and maybe the life expectancy is even more now. But I don't know. That's 3 to 5 years is what the standard answer to it is, I guess.
What have you learned from your journey so far, both personally and I guess your opinion on the Canadian medical system?
Yeah, like I've always been a big believer in healthcare and education. I mean, obviously I'm a teacher, so that's a given, but I've always been a big supporter of healthcare. And it's weird to find myself in this situation as somebody who was always so, involved in my healthcare. I didn't ever like sit on the sidelines if something felt off. I was at my doctor's. And so it's weird to kind of be in a situation like this. And I almost describe it as like a comedy of errors of how everything sort of fell apart, where it was like, I happened to be breastfeeding and I got this rare type of cancer and everyone thought it was that. And like, there were just so many things that happened that made it to be the point where the cancer had spread. Even when I was experiencing fatigue, which is a big symptom side effect of cancer, and they were checking my blood work and hormones, and they're like, oh, you're almost 40, that's normal, you have a baby, you're just tired. But it wasn't, it was the cancer. And so there were so many things. And now that I find myself in the cancer world, obviously there are amazing doctors out there, there's amazing research happening in that, but they're not getting the right support, they're not able to do the things that they want to do to help their patients. And there's so many, the system's so rigid because you have to do this box of standard of care before this box, and it's any other, I think, ailment that people deal with doesn't have like even as a cardiac patient, I've never experienced that. It was like, oh, let's try this and see if it works, and then, oh no, we can try this one. Like, there's no flexibility in cancer care, even though they know that there's precision oncology and how effective that can be. And so it's really hard because, you see people falling through the cracks, or people who don't know. Like, I'm not somebody who likes to push back, but unfortunately, it's the only way in this system is to advocate, even to be able to get a second opinion. And I actually recently changed medical oncologists, and that was a whole thing just to be able to do that in Canada. And it shouldn't be that way. Like if you're not with the right fit, and when you are metastatic, you're kind of tethered to a doctor for life. You want it to be a good fit. And so, yeah, all these things where it's just like, I feel like I'm constantly bashing my head against the wall trying to get anything done. And it shouldn't be this way. And it shouldn't just be because, I've sort of figured out certain things in the system, and then maybe I'm able to negotiate a little bit more than somebody else who just doesn't have the time or energy. It's not fair. It shouldn't be unfair. It's supposed to be equitable and just. And, we're here to save lives and do what we can and not put these rigid barriers in place.
What would you say to, or better worded better, what would you hope women take away from your story?
I think that I really want people to know that, it's important to stand up for yourself. I don't think it wasn't one particular doctor that just didn't listen to me. It was a kind of a combination of people and reinforcing that I was fine, kind of getting gaslit a bit. I think I want people to know that if something feels off in your body and you're not getting the answers you need, that you need to push back. Nobody's going to fight for your life as much as you. As much as I was like a postpartum mom, navigating new baby at home and a toddler and everything, nobody was looking after me. You know, everybody just sort of brushed me off until I became this person now who's, you know, has incurable cancer. And even when I was initially diagnosed and they thought I was stage 2, there was like urgency to try and save my life. Okay, we'll get you in surgery. We're going to start. And then when they realized I was stage 4, it's like everything just stopped. And they're like, oh, like I do remember one time going to my previous oncologist. I was concerned about the drugs I'm on. I have cardiac issues and they can cause long-term heart side effects. So I had some questions about that. And he had looked at me like I was crazy. And he's like, Miss Holman, you realize you have terminal cancer, right? Like it was stupid of me to be worried about long-term effects of my heart getting damaged from these drugs. But it was just like, it's like, are you kidding me? I'm completely traumatized by everything that's happening to me. My life has blown apart. I can't go back to work and be a contributing member of society. I'm raising my kids while going through chemo. And then I'm just being treated like, don't you know you're dying? Like, why do you care? Like, it's just been such a, like, well, even when I tell my story or talk about it with people, like, it's just so, it shouldn't be this way. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. And the fact that I'm in this mess in the first place is frustrating enough. But, you know, add on that just kind of, you know, this attitude of like, oh, you're stage 4, not much we can do. We can't save your life kind of attitude is not helpful.
Well, you're an incredible inspiration, and your advocacy will undoubtedly save many lives. I know you're going to have a long life. From one cancer patient to another, optimism goes a long way. Doctors said I think they gave me 5 to 7 years about 5 years ago, and I'm not taking it sitting down. And I conceded you're not either.
Yeah, exactly.
Tabitha, I want to thank you today for sharing your story, and just all the best.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.